Hello guys, Joker the Fool here, back at it again with another overview. This is an overview of the Lost Pages. This is from Zaid Comics, ran by Brandon and Philip Diaz, and they were kind enough to provide me with with review copies of the first volume of the Lost Pages and Myths of the Lost Pages, which is a supplemental book to the Lost Pages. But we're going to focus on the Lost Pages here for now, and this is an anthology. So it's a collection of stories and they're all loosely tied together. Of course, there is a second book of this available along with Myths of the Lost Pages. But in this first book, it's more about less an introduction to a bunch of characters and then beginning to loosely tie all of these together. And I do love this. I love the themes and the art and the characters of this book. I don't necessarily love them all being tied together and existing in one universe. It feels a little bit incoherent to me on that basis, but the writing for these characters and the art for everything in this is absolutely done fantastically. So you've got the silhouette, and this is basically like a shadow, instead of being evil, goes throughout the dark underside of the city and eliminates the criminal scum. And that's basically the main motif of the story. It's just a monologue ending with taking down a criminal. So it's pretty simple. It's black and white, mostly a lot of black because the main character is Silhouette. Do love the style of this one. It's probably one of the stronger stories in this book, and definitely if you're going to take any one of these characters and give them their own full series, Silhouette would probably be close to the top on this list. Wild Card is another interesting one, and you can see here, this is Silhouette takes place in Chicago, and then you've got this taking place in Chicago here, and you've got this hobo who says, I have all these stories to tell you, let me tell you another one, and then he goes into telling the story of Wild Card, which is a bit of like a Moby Dick kind of situation, where you've got basically a bunch of sailors and then they get attacked by these monsters. Really strong art here. So you see the lettering. All the lettering is done by Philip Diaz, and he goes for different styles for each of these stories that are told, and they're all done fantastically. And this is fantastic art that's done here. Of course, he got a lot of TNA, so that was true in Magic Cop, and this is certainly true with Wild Card. But we're moving on to the next story, and of course you see the Lost Pages there into Crimstone, and Crimstone is definitely one. I did have a post-it note, and I accidentally ripped this, so I feel really bad. But anyway, Crimstone follows this young woman. She has a very awkward childhood, very isolated, because she's got this like invisible friend that's Crim, and then eventually she becomes a fighter, or she becomes a bodybuilder, and then she becomes a fighter on that basis. Fantastic art and lettering from this, and this is definitely one of the stronger stories in terms of characterization, definitely in terms of art, and one that I would prefer to have a full series, or at least giving Crimstone its own book. And that to me is really where I view the weakness in this, is that you have a bunch of interesting ideas that are in the Lost Pages. It's just that there's never really enough there really isn't enough time to let these stories breathe and trying to tie them all together. It feels to be a bit of using. It doesn't seem to be the best thing to do from a narrative perspective. And you've got the Masquerade, which definitely's got a much more of a retro style to it, or at least this has got a retro style to it. It's got that very much that I'm not sure if Diesel Punk's the right way to talk about, but a Great Gatsby feel to it. And of course, you're taking The Mask and Guy Fawkes and combining that into one character. And this is all decently interesting. And again, all the art for this is fantastic. So there's a roster of artists that they work with, and they're all doing fantastic work. So on that basis, just flipping through this and reading this without, if you don't care about story that much, which I think if you like comics, you should care about stories. So not to say that these stories are bad or uninteresting. It's just that what Philip is trying to do is make this tie these all into one story that centers around a hobo who has the lost pages. And while that is slightly interesting, I think what's more interesting are the individual characters themselves, and having them introduced as their own characters would be the thing that I would prefer to see more of. But that's not the what they're going for. But this is the Masquerade, and with the Masquerade, that is the main introduction, or at least that's, to me, what's going to be the main link into tying together all of these stories. So you see how it ends, and then you see you've got them talking. It's like, oh, did the Masquerade die? And so like, I see the end, and then boop, out there, and then you've got the Masquerade there. So this, to me, seems that the Masquerade is going to be the one who's going to link all of the other characters together. And while that is decently interesting, like I said, with the way that Crimstone works, with the way that Silhouette works, I think you could take those stories and have them be their own. But we'll go into Myths of the Lost Pages. And Myths of the Lost Pages is really short, so it's a supplemental book where you've got most of, basically, all the characters that show up in the Lost Pages book, and you give them like a couple of pages each. Silhouette's got another story that's basically dealing with the fall of his first book. Wildcard is going for an Egyptian theme instead of a like a more Moby Dick theme, or like 19th century or 18th, late 18th to early 19th century ship sailing with a supernatural aspect to it. This is definitely an Egyptian theme. Weight of the weight of a soul. That's very much the Egyptian afterlife. Of course, you've got Anubis there, and all this art, like I said, is fantastic. So just like flipping through it and looking at it, especially I love Crimstone. It's got such a unique style with Crim and the lettering, but there really isn't, especially with Myths of the Lost Pages, there really isn't enough in terms of page count. So nothing is given enough room to breathe to really get these deep, complex narratives. So it's more or less taking all of these characters, introducing them, and then tying it all together, and that's where the complex narrative is going to be formed, and that's something that's going to take some time, because in the Myths of the Lost Pages, there's maybe, I don't know, 5-ish pages of linking everything together, and that's not enough to really get that across to the reader. Now, one of the more interesting characters to me, and we'll remove this post-it note here, is the People. So he's introduced in Myths of the Lost Pages, to my knowledge, and I absolutely love this character design. This is a vigilante character that's based off of the values of the Constitution. I mean, he's literally got the preamble. The preamble of the Constitution on his back. He's got, the stars, and then he's got the stripes on his face as well. Absolutely love the design of this character, the concept of this character, but there's just such a low page count in this that it's like, well, I can't really say anything much about that, other than I would love to see like the People series, right, where he's just going around smashing in guys and saying, stuff like, don't take my Second Amendment rights, or, whatever. You would imagine. But the art is fantastic, and all the lettering is done really well. And that's one of the things that I've emphasized with this. And then the other the other two stories I want to highlight are Drift. And Drift is basically I don't want to say generic, but it's taking that inspiration from manga. So you basically got like a speed racer type of character that comes in and saves a girl who's being mugged, or at least mugged, and then almost assaulted is the better terminology to go about it. Absolutely love this style. It's very heavily, basically directly inspired by manga. It's done quite well. Absolutely love to see that. And then you've got the Matte Black, which is basically like a female Venom. So you got a high school student, and she's got, this black stuff that she gets infested by, and then it's found out that she's able to, it gives her superpowers, right? She gets shot, and she gets shot, and the bullet doesn't kill her, because this, black goo absorbs it, and then she becomes black and matte, or at least that's the implication of that story. But that's really where it starts and ends for that. And that's something, again, that would be like, well, I'd love to see a Black Matte series and reading a 50-page first issue, and then see how that goes, rather than just have this be part of the Lost Pages, where you're taking that story and all the other ones, and trying to tie it all together with a nice little bow through this the idea of the lost pages existing in the hands of some hobo in Chicago. While that is interesting in and of itself, it's not necessarily what appeals to me as a reader, and I don't think it's going to appeal to quite everybody. But with the amount of stories and how much they vary stylistically, you can definitely pick these up and you'll find something that is going to tickle your fancy. And there is a second issue for this, and based on what I've read here, I definitely would read that second issue. These aren't uninteresting, they're not done poorly, and the art for this is really stand out. So even if the writing is weak because it's relying on doing something a bit complicated, the art is fantastic and really carries the experience through. But that is all I have to say on that. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. Joker is out.
Thank you for stopping by the Velvet Room. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe so you can keep up with Velvet Room Publishing, and go to velvetroompublishing.com if you want to go even deeper into the Velvet Room.